Morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Deb Singh, and I'm just going to start reading our statement. We at the Toronto Rape Crisis Centre, Multicultural Women Against Rape, are deeply concerned by the decision of the PC government to change plans for the funding increase within the previous gender-based violence strategy, leaving sexual assault centres to cope with already limited resources in a time of increased demand for support services. Yesterday, Minister responsible for women's issues, Lisa MacLeod, announced an $11.5 million increase to shelters and counselling services. The Toronto Rape Crisis Centre, Multicultural Women Against Rape, are here to make a statement in response to this announcement. By repackaging this funding, the PC government has sent a clear message to survivors of gender-based violence that we cannot truly count on the support of this government. This government could have already issued these funds, knowing that survivors have been waiting for months to access services that could have been strengthened if this funding had been granted months ago. Further, MacLeod's statement offered no clarity on who would be getting this increase, how much we would receive, or how long it would take to access the funds. Sexual assault centres are funded under the Ministry of Attorney General, and we have yet to hear any statement from Minister Caroline Mulroney. Survivors in Ontario can't wait. At our centre, survivors of all genders have been waiting for over 18 months to see a counsellor. Survivors have been turned away 15% of the time when requesting someone to accompany them to their sexual assault court proceedings or when reporting. They have experienced increased wait times on our 24-hour crisis line, and our volunteers have been pushed to their service provision capacity. Given the increase in discussions regarding sexualized violence we have seen since the #MeToo and #TimesUp movements, the previous promised funding would have not augmented our services in any way. In a time where rape crisis centres all over the province are struggling to keep up with the increased demand for support, the PC government is leaving survivors behind. And in a time when multiple allegations of sexual misconduct have surfaced against various members of the PC party, we clearly see that we need more services and supports than ever. As the only rape crisis centre in Toronto, we represent thousands of diverse survivor experiences, and we are deeply concerned to know where the current government stands when it comes to education, women and gender diverse people, children, Indigenous communities, and survivors of sexual violence. Further, we oppose all the cuts in the fall economic statement. These changes prevent Ontarians from accessing health care, dental care, childcare programs, and other vital services that maintain a high standard of living for Ontarians and reduce crime and poverty. We demand that the PC government commit to the same funding underscored in the gender-based violence strategy, a 33% increase over 3 years to all 44 rape crisis centres across Ontario and the other gender-based violence support services in the original agreement. Further, we demand the reinstatement of the 2015 school curriculum and that all gender identities be included in government policy going forward. These issues remain connected. The government for the people shouldn't be making survivors across Ontario wait any longer. Thank you. Do you have any questions for me?
So can you just explain how much funding you were expecting and when you were expecting it? How long have you been waiting?
Yeah, so in May 10th, the Ministry of Attorney General issued a letter to all rape crisis centres, and I don't know the funding formula they used, but we expected a $159,000 increase for this fiscal year, and there was a promise for that for 3 years. So we were expecting 159,000 in this fiscal year. So yeah.
Typically, when would you receive that money? At what point in the year?
Well, because of the election, everything kind of pushed things. So as soon as there were 3 weeks prior to the election, we couldn't have any information from our regional contact at the Ministry of Attorney General. So had there not been an election, perhaps we would have received the funding months ago. It was very likely that we would have, because other organizations, particularly shelters, had received part of the gender-based violence strategy monies prior to the election.
And when exactly did you find out that you weren't going to be receiving this?
Well, technically, we haven't got information from the Ministry of Attorney General that we're not receiving this, or that we are receiving this. But this is sort of the point. Certain services have received monies within the gender-based violence strategy. We know we needed this money much before the Liberal government promised it. Survivors have been waiting on a wait list as long as I've been working at the Toronto Rape Crisis Centre, Multicultural Women Against Rape. So this monies was always needed. And so it really is a question of like, how long will the PC government decide to allow us to have an understanding of what the money is going to look like when we're talking about this new funding commitment for violence against women of the $11.5 million, and what that would actually look like for us as a one rape crisis center in Toronto, but across Ontario.
You don't know if you're part of this funding.
Exactly, because the Ministry of Attorney General is our major funder. And so yesterday's announcement made it sound like counselling services would access this funds, but that doesn't necessarily, we're not actually funded by the Ministry of Community Social Services, Children and Women's Issues.
I was just going to say, you mentioned a few things just in terms of like wait times and accompanying people to court proceedings. Can you speak a little bit more just in terms of what specifically, aside from these things, what the money will go to? Are we talking hiring more counselors? Can you just elaborate?
Yeah, so the original letter actually stated the Ministry of Attorney General allowed us to do two things with the money. It was either to be used for rural transportation, but because we're Toronto, we don't necessarily need to access that. We could access hiring additional counselors. This would mean we would have more capacity around service provision in the frontline context. But of course, at the Toronto Rape Crisis Centre, Multicultural Women Against Rape, we're also very committed to eradicating sexual violence. So public education is a huge part of the work we want to do, and all aspects need funding. Survivors, once they've experienced sexual violence, need to be able to access supports, but also we need to fund programs that allow for education around consent, sexual violence, and this is where some of the monies would go.
Have you had to make any cutbacks because you haven't received the monies you were expecting?
Yes. I mean, we're lucky that we've been able to commit to our 7 staff, but in the course of the time I've been at the center, there's obviously been many cuts that we've had to make. But I think one of the biggest things that I'm seeing right now is the fact that we have to, what's most sustainable is hiring somebody who has a full-time capacity and can fully be in the center in all ways. But what is expected of us with our minimal funding is hiring contract or piecemeal honorariums to people, and that really doesn't create a sustainability or continuity of high-level care for survivors.
Have you received any indication just in terms of the consultations that the government is also planning? Are you guys going to be involved in that in any way?
Well, we have petitioned to send a letter to request to be on some sort of consultation group within Lisa MacLeod's ministry. So we really hope that they are willing to welcome us at the table.
And you've sent the letter to Minister MacLeod, like her office, or who have you sent it to?
We are going to send it to her office, yes. Yes, and I just to add to that, if I can, they recently dissolved the Roundtable for Violence Against Women, who are all nonpartisan experts in the field. So I really don't know who else they're going to consult with, because those folks are very high-level understanding of sexualized violence, intimate partner violence, gender-based violence across Ontario. So I hope that Lisa MacLeod will welcome a lot of those voices back at the table, because those folks are the ones who have been doing this work in our communities in Toronto, but also at the roundtable level in the previous government.
From what we've heard from individuals who were involved with the roundtable previously, do you think they would be willing to kind of come forward and be part of those consultations? Because we did see a couple of people resign from those, from the roundtable previously. previously. So what are you hearing? What's the sentiment there? How willing are people to?
I can't speak to how willing they might be to come back to the table, but what I can speak to is their commitment to end gender-based violence in Ontario. So I know that they are doing, from the frontline work to these bigger consultation pieces of work in their communities, and they are committed to that. So whether they continue to be welcomed back at a consultation table and agree to do so, I can't say, but I know that they're tirelessly doing the work right now.
So if you take part in the consultations, or when you do, what message would you like to get across to the government?
I would like to say that the previous government, not only by creating a sexual violence action plan, and also in addition to that, a gender-based violence strategy, did they give monies to organizations. The bigger thing I think they did was, from the top down, say that survivors in Ontario are important, and we are going to put money to that. That we believe survivors, and we are going to have a 13-point commitment to direct ending sexualized violence within Ontario. And that is the kind of work I would like to see from the PC government. From the top down, truly understanding all aspects of gender-based violence, which includes trans and non-binary people, which include understanding certain language like gender-based violence versus violence against only women, because we know all Ontarians can experience all kinds of sexualized violence, and understanding consent and wanting to teach it in our schools. Those are just some of the things that we know are all interconnected issues when it comes to ending gender-based violence.
Can you speak to just what this money would mean for individuals who have experienced violence?
Well, I'll say right now, if we already had the money, I wouldn't be here today. I would be supporting survivors. I wouldn't have been wasting all night writing statements. I would have been actually in the work, in the front line, supporting my coworkers. My coworkers would also be able to do that. If we had the money, we wouldn't have to worry about deficits, or whether or not we'll be able to provide vouchers for our service users at a holiday time, or tokens for them to be able to access our services. These are basic things that, of course, when you don't have to worry about those things, you don't consider them in your plans. So survivors, when they call a rape crisis center, it's one of the hardest things they ever have to do, because it's like admitting that they experienced sexual assault. So to hear that they have to wait 18 months is more of a crushing blow of the cycle that they experience when trying to to get support. Not only did they experience interpersonal violence, but now systemically, supports aren't there for them. People don't believe them. When they go to the cops, they experience all kinds of repeats of trauma. So we need to actually provide some systems where survivors don't feel disappointed or re-traumatized when they try to actually access support.
Able to access any immediate support, or are you saying everyone's waiting for over?
Well, we have a 24-hour crisis line, and we have been in operation for 45 years at the Toronto Rape Crisis Center, Multicultural Women Against Rape. But crisis line is not the kind of it's only in crisis, right? So crisis intervention does not end sexual violence. It helps people after the fact. And I think when I heard Lisa MacLeod speak yesterday about her announcement, what she talked about was ending violence against women. So if we really want to do that, we need concerted, intentional efforts, and we need to take leadership from the experts who've been doing this work.
So people can call into the crisis line and get sort of immediate help, but then they're waiting longer term for counseling. Is that how it works?
Yeah, because we have increased folks asking for support for face-to-face counseling and crisis line. We have just longer wait times on all ends. Any other questions? We're good. Thank you.